Hello, my friend, and welcome to the very first episode of the Butterfly Code, where heart-centered entrepreneurs create prosperity and happiness through transformation. I'm your host, Jille Bartolome, MCC, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast has been living in my heart for a long time. It's born out of a question I've asked myself, and that I've heard echoed in the hearts of so many people I've coached over the years. Is it possible to succeed in business, thrive in life, and still feel deeply joyful and connected to who I am? And after all of these thousands of hours of coaching and training other coaches, I'm here to tell you the answer is a big yes. And the point of this podcast is to help us all understand the science and skill behind a life that you love and a business or profession that supports that life. This podcast was created for people like you, people who care about living with purpose, people who are building businesses, families, and dreams, and who want to do it with integrity and authenticity and heart. This podcast is for the ones who know there's more to success than just checking boxes, hustling harder, or chasing someone else's definition of prosperity. And here's something I believe with my whole heart. This life, the one we're living in right now, is the only one we really know we have. There's no guarantees, probably no do-overs, and absolutely no perfect timing to save us. This is it. And even if there is more, it's our job to make the most of what we have right now. Not someday, not when things settle down, but now. This moment, this breath, this beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary life. You see, you deserve to feel the joy of really being alive, not just being productive. You deserve delight, not someday after the work is done, but while you're doing the work. And I believe we can build lives and businesses that make space for both meaning and happiness. That's the heart of this show, and that's the journey we're starting together. This is our beginning, our first episode, and over the weeks ahead, we're going to talk about what it really means to live well, to create happiness on purpose, and to become the kind of person who radiates confidence, clarity, and joy, not because life is perfect, but because you've built it on purpose. You'll hear me reference my signature course, Happiness on Purpose, The Science of a Prosperous Life Well Lived, which is the inspiration behind so many of the conversations we'll have here. That course is the heart of Life School, and this podcast is where those ideas come alive in real time. So wherever you are right now, your car, on a walk, sitting with your coffee, I'm extremely grateful you're here. So what exactly is the Butterfly Code? The name came to me as I was reflecting on the nature of true transformation. Think about it. Before a butterfly ever spreads its wings, it lives through a complete metamorphosis. It goes inward, it dissolves, it breaks down, and becomes something entirely new. And then, when the time is right, it emerges, not just different, but beautiful and free. That's the kind of transformation we're talking about here. Of course, metaphorically. The Butterfly Code isn't a formula or a checklist, it's a mindset. It's a way of living, a way of being. It's the choice to let your personal and professional growth be led by purpose, guided by heart, and grounded in your own truth, a truth that you get to choose. It's the inner work and the outer expression of building a life that's prosperous, meaningful, and aligned. The code in the Butterfly Code isn't just metaphorical. It's a nod to the actual science behind happiness and human flourishing. It points to the field of positive psychology, which emerged at the same time as coaching did in the late 1990s, when a group of psychologists led by Martin Seligman, began to ask a radically different question. For over 100 years, psychology has focused almost exclusively on what made people suffer. We've literally spent decades studying depression, anxiety, trauma, and dysfunction. And while that research is important, it left us with a gap. We knew a lot about what made people unhappy, but very little about what made them thrive. Positive psychology was born from the idea that it was time to study what goes right with people and what makes life worth living, what creates joy, purpose, meaning, resilience, connection, and success. It's the science of happiness and a life well lived, a prosperous life well lived. And that's the code we're breaking open together. These aren't just feel-good ideas. The principles we'll talk about in this podcast are evidence-based. They're learnable and they're actionable. Happiness, confidence, and prosperity aren't just outcomes you stumble into. They're built intentionally from the inside out. And when you understand the science, you combine it with your inner wisdom and lived experience, you become unstoppable. Every episode of the Butterfly Code will peel back a layer, offering you grounded tools, soulful reflections, and a little science to help you live more fully in the life you have and become the version of yourself you were always meant to be. Because transformation doesn't just happen once. It's more like an unfolding, a series of choices. And when you choose to live on purpose, guided by joy, integrity, and truth, everything changes. Okay, so let's talk about the myth that we've been sold, the one that so many of us have swallowed without even realizing it. It goes something like this. If you work hard, achieve enough, perform well, and check all the right boxes, then you'll be able to be happy. Sound familiar? Most of us were raised inside this framework, whether it came from our families, school systems, corporate environments, or just our culture at large. We were taught, either directly or through constant repetition, that happiness is the reward for success, that it's something you earn, something that comes after you've proven your worth. So we hustle, we strive, we perfect, we take care of everyone else. We delay joy, thinking we'll finally get to rest once we arrive. So many of the people I've coached have done all of that and still feel disconnected, anxious, stuck, or quietly miserable. And that's what usually brings them to coaching or to taking my course on happiness. I've seen it over and over again in clients, in friends, and yes, even in myself. People who have dedicated themselves to building incredible businesses, raising beautiful families, and pouring themselves into everything they were supposed to do, but who quietly admit that they feel empty, burned out, or like they've lost themselves somewhere along the way. We've been told that happiness is the finish line. But what if that's just not true? What if the secret isn't to chase success and hope that happiness catches up to us, but to start with happiness? What if happiness is the foundation, not the outcome? Here's the thing. Happiness isn't about everything being perfect. It's about being aligned. It's about feeling joy in who you are, how you show up, and the life you're building. When you lead with that kind of clarity and emotional well-being, everything you build on top of it becomes more sustainable, more soulful, and truer to you. In this podcast and inside my Happiness on Purpose course, we flip that old model on its head because You don't have to earn your happiness. It is not a prize, it's a practice. And it can start right now, exactly where you are. So here's the question I want you to sit with as we continue. What if happiness isn't the reward, but the way? So let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the science, the actual data and research behind happiness and what it really means to live well. This is where positive psychology comes in because it's the foundation of the work that I do. And as I mentioned earlier, positive psychology emerged in the mid to late 90s when psychologists began asking a radically different question. Not what makes people suffer, but what helps them thrive. And what they discovered is both beautiful and practical. Research shows that when we cultivate happiness intentionally, it doesn't just make us feel better, it makes us function better. People who report higher levels of happiness have stronger immune systems, better problem-solving skills, increased creativity, more fulfilling relationships, higher incomes, and longer lives. In other words, happiness is not the cherry on top, it's the foundation. It impacts how we think, how we lead, how we connect, how we grow, and even how we handle adversity. It affects everything. Now, here's a piece of research that I really love sharing because it's so empowering. According to studies by Sonia Lubomirsky, about 40% of our happiness is influenced by intentional activity. That means what we do, how we think, and how we focus our attention, how we structure our days can significantly shape how happy we feel. And that is huge because it means happiness isn't just genetic. It's not all based on your circumstances. And it's definitely not something you're either lucky enough to have or forever chasing. You have agency. You can create happiness, at least 40% of it, and you can practice it and you can build it. And this is where the idea of happiness on purpose comes alive. You don't have to wait for conditions to be perfect. You don't need to fix everything before you feel good. You can start now with small, doable, intentional shifts that lead to big transformations over time. So many of us were taught to push through life, hoping that happiness would eventually arrive if we just worked hard enough. But the science tells us a different story. It tells us that happiness isn't the thing we get after success. It's the thing that helps us get there and enjoy it even more when we do. And to me, that's the best news we could ever ask for. So why does all of this matter to you as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a professional, as someone building something meaningful in the world? Because happiness isn't just a personal perk, it's a professional advantage. When you prioritize your happiness, when you learn how to generate it from within, it impacts everything. Your leadership becomes more grounded and magnetic. Your decision-making becomes clearer and more confident. Your relationships, especially with clients, collaborators, and team members, become more authentic and connected. And your energy, it becomes something others feel, something that draws people in. Here's what I've seen over and over again. When you're exhausted, disconnected, or quietly doubting yourself, your business will reflect that. You might still be showing up, but your spark is dimmed. Your creativity is blocked. You second guess your value, and you start pouring from an empty cup, which is basically impossible. But when you're tapped into your joy, when you're being truly authentic, when you're aligned with what matters, and when you're practicing happiness on purpose, your whole energy shifts. And that's what people respond to. That's where your influence grows. not because you're trying to prove something, but because you're being something real, something magical. Happiness is not passive. It's not indulgent. It's fuel, it's clarity, and it's momentum. And as heart-centered entrepreneurs, we aren't just building businesses, we're building lives. Lives that reflect our values, lives that hold space for presence, peace, creativity, and connection, and happiness that brings us back to alignment with our own wisdom. And from that place, prosperity flows. Because true prosperity isn't just money in the bank. It's waking up with energy. It's feeling at peace with your choices. It's being proud of what you've created, not just because of what it looks like on the outside, but because of how it feels on the inside. This is why happiness isn't optional. It is essential, not just for your life, but for your work and your bank account. Here's what you can expect moving forward from the Butterfly Code podcast. Every episode is designed to offer you something meaningful, something you can use in your real life right away. You'll hear about the science of happiness, confidence, and success, but also the heart behind it. We'll talk about real transformation, not just as a concept, but as a lived experience. I'll share tools, insights, reflections, and powerful questions to help you build your version of a prosperous, happy life. And along the way, you'll hear stories, my own, my clients', and maybe even yours. Stories of becoming, of shedding old patterns, and stepping into something more aligned, more powerful, and more true. I'm also deeply connected to an extraordinary community of heart-centered entrepreneurs, professionals, and coaches. And throughout this podcast, you'll hear from them too, their stories, their insights, and the powerful tools they've used to align their lives and businesses with purpose and joy. And all of that will be woven into our journey. These aren't just success stories. They're stories of becoming, of transformation, alignment, and real sustainable growth. And I can't wait to introduce you to them. And let me be clear, this podcast isn't about pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's not about toxic positivity or slapping a smile over all the hard stuff. This is about transformation that's grounded in truth, in emotion, in science, and in soul. It's about giving yourself permission to feel everything and still choose joy. Still choose to walk through the fire and come out with the wings. This is the code we're living into together. Before we close today, I want to leave you with a moment to reflect and a simple truth to carry with you. What if you let happiness guide your next step instead of waiting until you thought you'd earned it? What if happiness wasn't the reward at the finish line, but the energy that fuels the journey? Let those questions land. Let them soften the part of you that still thinks joy has to be justified. Because here's the truth. Happiness isn't selfish. It isn't frivolous. It's a frequency. And when you tune into it on purpose, you begin to see your life through a more powerful lens. You begin to lead, create, love, succeed, and show up from a place of fullness. Each episode, I will be sharing an affirmation for you to take with you. And today's affirmation is, I give myself permission to build a life where happiness is the way. Say it, whisper it, write it on a sticky note. I give myself permission to build a life where happiness is the way. Let it become the new story you tell yourself, because it's not just a nice thought. It's a radical act of alignment. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I know your time and energy are precious, and I'm deeply grateful for you to choose to spend some time here. If this episode resonated with you, I'd be honored if you'd take a moment to subscribe. There's plenty more to come. Leave a comment or share it with someone who might enjoy it or even need this message, because that's how we spread the ripple. And if you're ready to take this work even further, come check out Happiness on Purpose, my 12-week course on the science of a prosperous life well lived at www.cplifeschool.com, and you can find that link in the show notes. This is just the beginning, because you're not chasing the dream, you're becoming it. With so much love, I'll see you in the next episode.